Good evening, folks, and welcome to the OTF webinar. This one is called Connected But Alone, Implications of Technology. This is part 2 featuring Rod Lucier. So I know that some of you were part of the first one and are in for a real treat tonight. Rod comes to us from southwestern Ontario, and he's been active in education for a long time. He's very happy in his retired life right now. I'm going to be posting his Twitter handle, and I do recommend that you check it out. He's got lots of great stuff in there. So, once again, welcome to our webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to Rod.
Thank you so much, Trish. You're so good at this. It's like you get us to write to 7:30 right on the button almost. And let your mother know if she'd like to join. We have room if she's ringing and she's on the side. Thanks, everybody, for joining in. I know I had a busy enough day here, but I wasn't in a classroom that left me drained and wondering what am I going to do when I get home tonight. So I appreciate you taking the time. I hope that what we'll talk about today, building on what we talked about last time, will be worth your time. I think some of the things I uncovered were surprising to me, and I hope you'll find them of use. So yeah, this little graphic to me is just like we were first this disconnected society, then we were wired, and now that we're wireless, you know, I don't know, this to me speaks of loneliness, this image, and it's one of the things that I've discovered in my research is that a lot of people using technology are uber connected, but they're not so together. So we're going to walk through a number of things that are looking at, in particular, the effects of our mobile devices and the way we use social media, and especially on those effects on young people. So before we start, Trish gave us a little bit of an intro, but let me give you a test to see if you can't use a larger font. Again, we're going to use that toolbar there, so you're going to click the letter and then choose a font like 30-something and see if you can't write something tall so that we can all see it, to let us know what your role is in education. So we have an idea of the diversity of who's here and the types of students that that you're working with. If you're working with adults, you can write about that too. So I'm just going to write my role here. Give you a minute to write something there. So yeah, grade 2 teacher. I like seeing those pencils light up, and I'm actually content if anybody wants to grab the microphone at any time. Hit that little hand signal over on the left-hand side there above all our names. If you hit the hand, if you want to speak, let me know, and I'm happy to have you contribute, because I'm just one voice in the wilderness from Southern Ontario that's done a little bit of investigation, and your first-hand experience and what you uncover may be even more valuable. So we got guidance people, a couple of elementary, across the spectrum in elementary with our small group here, and special education. Okay, very good. So originally I had this thought when I set these webinars in place that we would break out into groups and have these conversations with voice to voice. So I think there's great value in hearing the voice of people rather than just text. But we'll stay together as a group because we're a modest size. But again, if you'd like to speak, we'd love to have you participate. So okay, occasional tech teacher, that's cool too. And is that tech? I'm curious if that is sort of high school tech that is like construction technology or automotive or foods. Is that kind of tech, or is it like tech as in digital tools? Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe someone will write something on there or something. Maybe write something in the chat to let me know about that. I'm curious about that. So with this variety, this is me. A few years ago when I brought some teachers up to Northern Ontario, someone took a picture of me, and I was in this mood that I was just, yeah, this is humming along. Whatever the PD we were doing on the edge of Algonquin Park had me in a mood. But I have a family, and I have a life outside of school, like you, I'm sure, do. But a lot of those things on the right-hand side of that picture are the variety of things I've been involved in and continue to be involved in. Project-based learning and design thinking have been on my radar for a long time, and I'm happy now that I'm getting to do some PD related to that over the next few weeks. But on the left side, you sort of see the family side of what I am and what I'm interested in. And I see Ramona's here. Golf tomorrow, Ramona. My brother's coming down from South River so that we can play and take advantage of the warm weather in Southern Ontario. But I know you had a busy day at school, and so I thought, let's have a program. Ideally, I wanted to get a what do you call it? Do you guys remember the TV guide, where you'd open up that thing and underline or check mark the things you wanted to watch throughout the week? Well, this is our TV guide for tonight. So we're going to look at a variety of things over the next hour or so. The evolution of media, how media has changed. We're going to review a little bit of the content that we talked about last time, so that people that might have missed that everything will sort of make sense for them. We're going to look at, sort of in conjunction with that, the impacts of this technology on our well-being and what the research says about that. And that'll sort of be done together. I started separating them out, and they just cross over too much throughout the presentation. And then lastly, we'll look at next steps, which largely we're going to look at in another session in another 10 days or so. But we'll give you an idea of where you can go for more information at the end of this presentation. We're going to start with this idea that technology and media used to be a connector. It was something that we'd listen to. If it was Fight Night, if it was Amos and Andy on the radio, whatever it was, the family was gathered around this common message. And when you grew up, maybe you were beyond radio, maybe you never had this experience. Like, I'm sure if you're teaching now, that's not the case. But the same was true of television. Interestingly, I came across this article that the BBC had a radio show, a children's radio show, and they just axed it about 6 or 7 years ago when they discovered that the audience was just old people that were listening to it. So young people had tuned out of radio and don't listen to live radio so much as we used to. But we used to watch television this way too. I think there's something about the idea of screen size that makes it sort of campfire-like, right? When it's a small screen, everyone's sort of huddled close. There's a more sense of community. And even today in our homes, where a lot of people have 50 and 60-inch televisions on the wall, we sort of sit back further apart from one another, and we have more space. And more than that, we have our own screens. We're oftentimes watching the big screen maybe together, but we've always got a phone by our side in many cases that we're checking other things at the same time. Or, if you're an affluent enough family that you have extra screens in your house, be they on a computer where Netflix is maybe running on an iPad or on a cell phone, we sort of spread out. Rather than coming together to watch something in common, our choices and options are so diverse that we separate from one another and we go it alone. And one of the things that the literature is talking about is the importance of community and getting together and talking to one another face to face. But even in our own homes, this idea where we used to come together isn't happening quite so much. Maybe you remember big time TV, where at one time the farewell episode of MASH, the final episode, had over 105 million people, I think it was 105.8 according to Wikipedia, who watched television together. Like, everybody watched it. It was one of those water cooler events where you get to school, or people come over for a visit, and everybody had that experience at the same time. They watched it together. Remember this? Hand up if you remember Who Shot JR? Does anybody remember? Anybody have an answer in the chat? Kim's got her hand up. Kim, hit the microphone if you'd like to talk about that for a sec. She says, Ramona has written down Kristen. Yes, and this actual photo is just from a scene where Kristen has just told JR, yeah, you can tell everybody that I did it, but your baby might be born in jail if you do that. So it was this idea that they'd have cliffhangers and everyone would sort of together experience something, rather than today where people see a complete package of things and they stream through it at their own pace. They'll watch 10 episodes at a time or more and go through it. I remember a number of years ago getting DVDs from the video store where the series 24 was out. You remember the series 24? It takes place over 24 hours in real time. And we watched the series over the period of 2 days, like almost in real time. Watched it, but it was this idea that you could, on your own pace, get through something. And there's something lost when people don't have the community around sharing that. There's just a couple more. Do you remember this? We'll date ourselves a little bit. Do you remember what Fonzie jumped looking for an answer in the chat? in 1977? The shark, absolutely right, Ramona. This is where television was really struggling to maintain an audience. How do you hold people's attention where the television show Happy Days had seen its zenith and was now on the down low, trying to be under the radar a little bit, not everyone watching to see what everybody's up to. So they have to do extreme things like this to keep the attention. Yeah, we are so old. And here's a tough one. Can anyone pick this one out? I believe this was around 1973. This was on live television. Does anyone recognize this scene? This is something that I would have been 10, 11 years old at the time, and everyone knew this was happening. We knew weeks in advance that this was happening. Vroom, vroom. What is it? It's vroom, vroom. Trish, go ahead, Trish. You participate if you like. Remember? All right. Some of you are far too young to appreciate this. This is Evel Knievel's ramp at the Snake River Canyon, where he basically launched a motorcycle, which was rocket propelled with like a jet that went off that ramp to jump over the Snake River Canyon. He survived it, but he didn't make it. I won't spoil it for you. If you're interested, you can look that up online and see the video clips of it. But it was when we experienced things together where that sense of community was more normalized than it is today. So here's my question to you. If you want to grab the text marker again, and again use a large font like say 36, you might want to lighten up the font because I think the default is black to write on the screen, might not show up. But pick a bright color and tell me, is there something that you experienced as a media event, something on television or on radio that you experienced as a member of a community? Is there anything that comes to mind? And by the way, if anyone wants to take the microphone and reminisce for a minute, we're welcome to do that as well. The last episode of Cheers. Did Diane did they get together? Or was that over? 9/11. Oh my goodness, yeah, I was teaching at that time. The Challenger disaster. I was in teachers college when that happened. I came home from school and experienced that, yes. Princess Diana, oh my goodness, just before school went back. Yes, we experienced that together, exactly. So from what I can see here, the most recent one, Space Jump, oh, the last Seinfeld, yeah. Last episode of Seinfeld after they ran 9 or 10 years. Space Jump. I can't remember Space Jump, what that's about. Columbine. Oh my goodness, yes. O.J. Simpson. Oh my goodness, yes. I remember being in the staff room when that verdict came. So a lot of news events, not so much entertainment events, but news events. There's one that's kind of small font. I'm trying to make it out. I wish I could read that. Oh, the shooting of Kennedy. That's going back. Yeah, a lot of people in the generation before us certainly would remember that. So we're interrupted in our lives by news events, in particular these negative, terrible events. And sort of, I remember when they first walked on the moon being, that news was live and to everybody's screen. But for entertainment, we've got Seinfeld and Cheers. For entertainment and choice to watch something together as a community, we don't necessarily have that. But it's those memories that you have put down there, I'll bet you there are really great details that you remember about that. Hello, jumped. Oh, from above the atmosphere. Thanks for clarifying that, Trish. Yes. This is the fellow who did just went straight up and with a mask on, jumped straight down from way, way up there. Okay, so the idea is that now our media, we're sort of on-demand consumers. We'll watch things that we want to watch when we want to watch it, as many episodes at a time as we'd like to. And our conversations are largely, hey, you gotta watch this, as opposed to experiencing in real time these cliffhanger moments, like what do you think's gonna happen? Who do you think did it? Why do you think this and that and that? So these conversations, the richness of it turns around to just, you gotta go watch that series, it's really good. That's one of the arguments that I have for the way we live our lives today in media, especially young people. So one of the things we talked about last time was how technology is sort of being pushed at us in ways that are sort of addictive. And I asked this question last time, and I'm interested to hear more from the people that are here tonight. What are the things at school that are proven to be a challenge related to technology, or at home are there challenges related to that? Because really, in considering the topic that we're considering, knowing what we will know at the end of this hour, it's nice to have a context for that. So as a teacher, what are the things that are frustrating or challenging for you? Not enough for the number of students. So not enough devices for the number of students so that everyone could experience something, or everyone could sort of have a common tool to get something done. Yeah? Yeah, so there's this expectation, and one of the things we're going to talk about partly tonight, and certainly at the next section, is this idea about the urgency to respond, especially right away, when there's so many channels we could pay attention to. Constant updates and mismatched technology. Certainly that used to be the case where software would become out of date, and today a lot of the tools sort of that we use, a lot of the social media tools, for example, are updated behind the scenes without us even knowing it when we get the automatic updates. Fear of missing out. Yeah, we'll talk about that. That's one of the key issues that we're going to look at today. So, in particular, we've got young people who their legitimate inability to put things down is for good reason. Unable to and keep checking their phone. Yeah. And I think the research and things that we'll share tonight will give you some insight as to why that is, and some inkling of what we can do about that. Math on iPad. So moving to everything on a screen. Interesting. Okay. Thanks for that. Thanks for participating and taking the time. Let's take a look at reminding ourselves of a couple of things. First, this idea about this slide actually got out of order in my presentation, but one of the things that people are dealing with young people is the putting things aside that need to get done for the things that people want to get done. The wanting to go and play that game, whether it's Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever the game is, the activity, or watching TV shows. There's stories of people failing out of university and college because they're binging on Netflix rather than studying, because it's so convenient to watch something that's perfectly suited to your interest, and the devices are now set to be able to tell you what your interest should be, because they can tell what your habits in the past have been and what might really be of interest to you. So that's one of the things that we're dealing with when people have access to a phone and a device, is that it takes away from the things that we have to do. You're right, Paula, that's exactly right, controlling what's being used. So a couple things. I've pulled some quotes from other people. Now I could say some wonderful things, and you'd not allowed to go, oh, that's very, very brilliant, and I'm sure you could do the same thing. But I found a number of people on documentaries and on reputed websites, and that have written books that have done the research behind the quotes, and sort of they bear more weight. So Byron Reeves, he's at Stanford University, and he's quick to qualify and say, hey, my research only deals with Stanford students. But he basically says students there are watching 3 hours of content on average a day. 3 hours. He's talking about mobile devices. 3 hours a day. Turning it on and off up to 300 times. And he said that's the average. So there are certainly some people that are turning their phone on and off 500 times a day to keep in contact with things that are of interest to them, and probably staying on twice that 3 hours in time. So how you can be a college-educated student knowing that access to that device is putting you there is quite startling. So if you put that software to measure how much time they spend on anything that grabs their attention, he says his research shows 10 seconds at a time. So we're living in a time where people are challenged to spend time and go deep. And a lot of your students, remember when we used to read books? The idea that finding quiet time and just distilling text into a story and trying to make sense of it, the patience to be able to do that when someone wants to check their phone 300 times a day is something that's a genuine challenge. So we talked last time about the way our phones are very much like slot machines. And I just want to revisit that idea and remind you of some things. This is Tristan Harris, and he, again, when we go to, there's some slides coming up from the Center for Humane Technology. This fellow is sort of seen as one of the bright lights in the creation world for technology creation. He's one of the most honest brokers out there as far as speaking the truth about things. But he recognizes that if we want people to check, and we looked at this last time, the rewards at the end are either there when you check your phone or they're not, or they're great long lists of things to look at, or there's just short lists. There's this randomness that is by design to make it as addictive as a slot machine. So this variable reward that is built into our phones and devices, every time you get an update for your phone, it's been updated by the developers to make it more addictive, to make you more likely to check your phone. That's the one thing they want, is for you to stay on your phone. That's where they make their money. So this idea about you going through this, again, a slide we used last time, just a reminder that these are the types of comments that we make ourselves, but our students are making this all the time. Double check, like the rat in the maze, the Skinner box, where pressing for a pellet, no pellet, oh, 3 pellets, no pellet, oh, 4 pellets, 2 pellets, 8 pellets. That randomness is what's really addictive. If every time you press the pellet you got one new message, you wouldn't do it. The power of it would not last, so the designers don't allow that to happen. Justin Rosenstein, he's one of the fellows that at Facebook helped create the like button. He was part of a team. But this is an interesting quote. He recognizes that selling attention is not a good idea. The financial intentions lead us to try and stare at our phones. We are becoming a nation of zombies that looks constantly at our phones. So if at your school you're working with students that have these devices, at high school it's very, very prevalent. The last 4 or 5 years that I was teaching, I noticed it all the time, that you had zombies in the hallways staring at their phones wherever they went, and they often sat next to walls, even if having lunch. When they sat down together, they didn't talk to one another, but they looked at their phones together. Looked at their phones independently, showed their phones to one another, but they didn't interact face-to-face. So it's all a part of the intentions, the financial needs of the companies that are making the apps. And one of the things that they're doing is they're getting data on you, and that data is being used to tell more and more other companies about how to access you and how to make you a consumer of theirs. So one of the things that happens is that this is a screen capture from what's the television shows? The Marketplace, Canadian show. But did you know that depending on how you use your phone, you get a different price for products because your phone tells information about you? So if you have bought things in the past, you will get a different rate for products when you go and search things up than another person who maybe has different habits. If you search on a different device, you yourself, if you search on your phone or in a browser that you've used before to search on, or someone else's computer, you'll get different prices and different product offerings. Your browsing history is sort of used by people that are trying to push things at you. So if you search for something, don't be surprised if it doesn't show up in your feed for weeks afterward, the same item. Your privacy settings and your ability and willingness to share information from the apps that you use, that information goes to people that are selling you things. So those ads that are coming your way are in part due to how your settings are set on your phone. The place that you're submitting your request from, that's going to have something to do with the price and content of what you get. And the apps that you download and keep on your phone that you if you go with the defaults, you're giving permission for the device and the people who made the apps to share your information. And interestingly, the people that made the app aren't so much interested in your information for their own purposes, but they're interested in selling that information because they can compile a list of all the people that use their particular tool, their app, their game, and they can sell that to other people that will advertise to you, so they can sell your email address. You ever wonder why email address is commonly one of the user IDs, information that they ask for? It's really, really valuable information if you have someone's email address and you want to market to them, especially if you know that an entire list is specifically a certain age group, or lives in a certain location, or perhaps has certain purchasing habits. Franklin Foer, one of the authors that I had a chance to listen to on a podcast, talks about the rise of personal assistance and how this idea about our choice disappearing, that it's almost like too much work to have to make a choice. So an advertiser telling you where to get something and what to get and what you'd like to have, the same as you log into Netflix and they have a list they'll recommend to you, because that opportunity for you to make the choice is somehow a chore, somehow a difficult thing. But now we're getting to a point where personal assistants, these ideas, Alexa or Siri, I forget the names of all of them, but you know that they're out there. And every time you're talking to them to make a suggestion to you, whether it's a recipe or something to make, or a website or television show to see, a product to buy, you're going to off-put your choices. And his concern, Franklin Foer's, is that this technology is going to be a part of us. We're already in places where the experiments are going on, where this information is being sort of connected to our brains by physical things that can actually, people are able to think things and have computers turn them into words, turn them into images. So we look at the changes we've seen in the last 10 years, well, the next 10 is going to be things that drip by drip are going to be drastically different than what we expect. And off-putting our choices and giving away our information and our likes and desires is going to make some decisions are going to be made on our behalf because of that. So let's go back to the Center for Humane Technology. This is one of the organizations, again, that Tristan Harris is supporting and behind. But his concerns are varied, and I pulled a couple slides from his website. First of all, about mental health and this idea that if we're on screens all the time, it actually increases stress, anxiety, and reduces sleep. Now, he could say that, and I was curious about that. So I went and investigated and found there's truth to it. So being on the phone can be bad for your health. Excessive use is associated with anxiety, irritation, frustration, and impatience. So they've studied people, and actually a lot of courses in universities, particularly I'm thinking of Stanford and Princeton and University of Chicago are some of the places that I found data and information on. They actually survey students as part of their psychological courses, like they use the students as sampling mechanisms, and over time they have built up catalogs of data that they can compare over the past. And they're finding that the use is correlated directly to increased stress. And Clive Thompson, another author, it wouldn't be surprised at that. Why would it be that young people in particular, if they have an uber awareness to everything going on around them, why would that not be healthy? To know that everyone's phone has the, when the driver was in Toronto running people over in that terrible scene there last week, that almost everybody found out at the same time because their phones were alerting them. The news alerts came up on their phone, or if they were on social media, it was coming up to them. So this idea about being aware of necessarily a lot of them are bad things, but these negative news items, you're overwhelmed with them. So there's an understanding about why that might be stressful. But Tristan also talks about the needs we talked about last time, about attention that users want. So much as advertisers want our attention, the users of a lot of mobile devices are looking for attention and comparing themselves to other people. So when we've got this fear of missing out, as was typed up on the earlier screen, it's a real thing. And if your friends are having a conversation and your teacher is more strict than the others and has your phones away, there's this genuine fear of missing out that you experience. Like the anxiety is related to that. And there's a little bit of research I'm going to get to in just a sec related to that. But Shemath is one of the fellows that was one of the early, I think he was one of the first hires at Facebook. But he talks about this this need to be acknowledged is just brittle and empty, and it's just a shallow thing that doesn't necessarily make one feel good. So his children don't have the access to the devices that a lot of our children do, because he's helping to make that choice as a parent. Jean Twenge is at San Diego State University, a professor of psychology, and her book, iGen, is the one that I came across again and again referenced. The research that she has done is being referenced all over the place. And there are some links in the end of the slide deck, and I'm sure they're going to be shared with everyone. Trish will share the links later. And actually, I'm going to take just a minute to tell you this before I forget it. But all of the slides that I use, I'm just going to put a link here in I'm just going to put this link in the discussion, because all of the slides that I post, if I post them at SlideShare, you can actually hyperlink to the research from a lot of these documents directly. So when you get to the final slides that have the links, you can link, but also the images and the quotes. There are links to where those quotes come from and that are embedded in that slide deck, so you can find them. But you know, along with what was said earlier by these other novelists, writers, it doesn't mean that you have a close connection to people, even if you have that multiple connection. So if that slot machine is making you have lots of likes and lots of hits, it's not actually real emotional connection that you're getting out of that. And her research is going to be mentioned a number of times in upcoming slides. So this idea about needing the popularity, this is just one of many stories that are out there about young people going into debt, trying to be popular. So if you need to shoot photos of yourself as selfies that people will like and will reshare and connect hashtags to, so that you can get more and more people, well, you have to travel. And if you have to travel, you have to take photos of yourself in different outfits. So if you're wearing different swimsuits or dresses or blue jeans, you can't take photos and have a following of hundreds of thousands of people and keep the same clothing on all the time. You have to switch it up. So it's easy to see how people can get into debt by doing such a thing. Have you heard the article, Is Google Making Us Stupid? Maybe you've heard this article, heard of this article. It was published a few years ago. Nicholas Carr is the fellow that wrote it, and he has since written a couple of books as well, talking about what the Internet's doing to our brains and how computers are actually changing us. But take a minute and just read this quote to yourself. We need a little bit of quiet in our lives. So for this slide, I just thought we gotta have a pause for a second. It's just a reminder to myself. We can't think if we're always looking for media to fill a void. It used to be that famous scientists or authors would go on their daily constitutional. They would get out and go for a walk, and that's where strokes of insight would hit them. And we are living in a time, the last 5 years or so, that we don't have the time to have quiet, to actually have ideas, to actually think about things that we might not otherwise have the chance to contemplate, because we're too busy looking at Netflix feeds or playing Candy Crush or checking our Twitter feeds, looking at the latest hashtag, because we have that fear of not knowing the news. That next new bit of information is the thing we look at. And if we target that with the information that we have, what do you get next? When you're looking for that next bit of information, when you scroll down, what is it you get? Do you discover what your friends are up to? Maybe you do. This is the key to the whole thing. You get what the computer thinks will keep you checking your phone. And it might be different for you than for me. So for you, it might be that you need to see 2 or 3 people that said something. It might be someone has to like your picture. You're going to get that information, but a lot of it is algorithms that are designed to keep you on your phone. So what do you get next? You get whatever it is that's going to keep you checking. every time you check. So Tristan, again, at the Center for Humane Technology, is talking about the race for attention and that desire of likes and shares as being the most important thing. This picture that he's chosen here is something that you can see in many, many high schools where everyone's on their own device. They're together, but they're alone. They're in their own little world. So Jean Twenge talks about what we need for mental health is spending time with friends in person and sleeping. Those are some of the things that we need. And they are some of the things that we're giving up when we're spending time on screens. And her research says 6 to 8 hours a day. I'm not sure which screens she's talking about, whether just phones or she's talking about phones and other devices, screens. I assume hers is different than the other fellow earlier that was looking at the college students. But screen time versus face-to-face time could be interesting to actually do some data in your family and on yourself. So here's an interesting thing, and maybe you can relate to this. This study, I believe, is at the University of Chicago. Anyway, they asked people to talk to one another, have a conversation, and some of the people had phones. And the people who had their phone near them said they were less likely to be friends with their partner, and they were less close to that person because they had access to other friends that were right there. That the mere presence of a phone had an effect in how they were able to tune in and focus on the person they were sitting across from. These are just strangers, and in 10 minutes of spending time with one another, those without the phone were able to focus and pay attention to one another and build friendships. And this is one of the things that we need to go. I'm just looking at that comment there. Katie has typed, when cell phones first became commonplace, I remember my mom trying to force me to take a phone when we went out with my friends, and I didn't want to. Now I can't go anywhere without my phone. Yeah, you've noticed a change in yourself, Katie, and one of the things that's I think we have to pause and recognize is that a lot of our young people will not have noticed this change because they came of age where at the age of 14 or 15 or younger than that, they got a gift of a cell phone. And so their entire teen and adult life, they've grown up with that device, and they don't remember what it was like to go out without that particular tool. So let's take a look at one of the ways people use their phone. I'm going to ask you to pick up your typewriter again and do a little bit of help here from you. Compare to me, like when I was young, it was voice calls, right? After school, you'd be on the phone, and I remember we just had the one phone. So I have 4 brothers. At the time, I had 3 brothers. One who's much younger than the 4 of us. But we would battle for that phone to be able to talk to our friends, especially in the winter time when no one wanted to go outside. In the nice weather, we'd be on our bikes face to face, riding around the neighborhood. But now, young people are texting all the time rather than being on the phone in voice calls. And I'm curious, I'd like you to help me do a comparison chart here. What are the characteristics of a voice call compared to a text message? How are they the same or how are they different? Maybe you could take a minute and take that typewriter tool and do a comparison. What's the same and what's different from a voice call to a text message? And of course, if anybody wants to take the microphone, I'll let you know. All you have to do is shoot your hand up and grab the microphone if you'd like to do a little bit of a verbal discussion about how voice calls and text messages are different from one another. And I know asking you to type something is kind of a bit of a chore after you've had a busy day, but if anybody wants to try that. I see no one really typing, a little bit of thinking anyways. Okay, let's jump to an answer that we can consider together. Oh, sorry. You can hear the tone of voice. Thank you. I'm not sure who wrote that, but thank you in the chat. I'm on mobile, so no typewriter. Thanks, Veronica. I appreciate that. Tone of voice as well. You can hear tone of voice. Excellent. Yeah, this understanding of trying to understand that, what do they mean by that emoji? I have to respond correctly to that. Oh my goodness, how am I going to respond to that? No context. Thank you. Longer time between responses. Yeah, like when you're on the phone with someone, you don't take a lot of time. It's spontaneous. Yes, that's a great, that goes perfectly with the comments that are on the right-hand side. Thank you. Here's my little comparison chart. You know, the phone call's in real time, and the text message might be in real time, depending on if the person wants to carefully craft a message that's going to be received correctly, or if they want to send you a message by not replying. Unfiltered serendipity, a conversation over the phone or face-to-face sort of goes wherever it's going to go, and the text message is more carefully considered. You're focused when you're on the phone, at least we used to be, but on a text chat, a lot of times people are having text chat with numerous people, or they're doing something else while they're texting. In voice or short codes is the difference. Voice calls with the tone that was alluded to in the earlier slide is more clear than a lot of misunderstandings. This, I think, is one of the most critical ones, is that a conversation is among two people, generally, versus a text message, which a lot of times is with a group. And I'm looking at the comment there, Ramona. You don't have to wait for rings when you send a text. You just send it, and you know they're going to get it at some point. It's a good point. Text messages are permanent. They are recorded. See, there's that idea about if you have a conversation with someone, it's just, you know, two people talking, and that chat can be represented accurately or inaccurately. You can screenshot it, see, and you don't know where your messages are going, whether they're being sent to other people or not. Good point. All really good. So our communication's changing, and one of the things about it is I was really down on this idea that, my goodness, all of the codes and passwords we have to keep track of, and my kids know that I know I make up my own short forms for things that they have to figure out. But this used to drive me crazy. Like, why don't they capitalize? Like, I'm still got this situation where maybe it's being a teacher is part of it, but I have a sense that in text I have to write in sentences with capitalization and with correct spelling, and young people don't. It drove me crazy until I met this guy, John McWhorter. He's at Columbia University. You can see articles that he's written online, or you can visit his TED Talk. But he talks about texting, even though it's something that looks like and is called writing, he calls it fingered speech. And texting is now writing the way we talk. You know how when you have a conversation with someone, you don't necessarily write in complete sentences. You don't talk in complete sentences, I mean. When you talk, you don't use maybe formal words. Maybe you use language that's more colorful. You don't always insert the commas or the periods. You break up your conversation and interrupt one another more commonly. This idea about text being communicated almost in a form that is making conversation into a text format, as opposed to the way I just rambled on and made a giant long run-on sentence about something that if I had to type it out, I would say it differently. But he's taught me that this language that they are inventing and creating is new. It is entirely new, and it is a different thing to just say hey in short characters and use emojis mixed in and not spell things and write short forms and not capitalize or period, because there's a familiarity, almost conversation-like, that is at the heart of what they're doing. Modern hieroglyphics, as one of the things emojis can be. That is a very good one. I don't know. I've got to use that comment, hieroglyphics as emojis. I like that a lot. So let's go back to Tristan's Center for Humane Technology again and consider the idea that social media is dividing us. It's actually, the big thing was it's going to bring us together, but it's actually dividing us, and there's a method to the madness of what's happening. So this is Michael Kaczynski, Stanford University expert, but you might know him from Cambridge University and Cambridge Analytica. He has found that by capturing what people write and what they like and what they follow, that they can learn a whole lot about every person that you are, that we are, and all of the people connected to us. So the logs that are available in a lot of cases to developers, but often given away to other developers who create games and content. His actual game that they developed first at Cambridge was this tool that had people answer survey questions, and those survey questions were compared to the Facebook data they had on these people, and then all of the data connected to all of the friends of friends. Because when you sign up for Facebook, or when you complete that survey, if you click "It's okay to share my information," or it's actually usually given as an opt-out, you have to click a box in order for your information not to be shared. All of that data gets shared. So there was an article just 2 weeks ago about how your likes on Facebook can predict all manner of information about you, from sexual orientation, race, and religion. So that if you compare how well a coworker knows you, and if you've liked 10 things on Facebook, Facebook knows you as well as that friend. And the more things you like, the better Facebook knows you. If you have liked as many as 300 things, Facebook knows you at your heart more than your spouse might know you. And these are the categories that they connect information on: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. OCEAN, O-C-E-A-N, is the acronym that they use. But that information, if they can score you and give you a grade, and you think, well, how can we give a grade to extroversion? How can we possibly, numberize that? And then think, we're teachers. We numberize science and technology, or we numberize mathematics, or we numberize language for report card purposes all the time. So it's hard for us to say, hey, how can they actually numberize that and give value to that? But they do. And they use that to market specific messages out to people. So one of the issues we're now dealing with, and I mean, it's still in the news in the United States just about every day, this idea that when they know about you, they can give messages to you that they know will trigger you. Are you familiar with the term emotional contagion? If you've ever been in a staff meeting where someone voices something really negatively, and a few other people nod and grumble and agree with it, that the whole mood of a room can change, that's an example of emotional contagion, where the mood can change based on how certain people within the group behave. This has been studied for upwards of 20 years. And moods connected to emotions and information sharing is a real thing. But it's hitting social media platforms now where moods are changing. So if someone posts fake news out there to get people upset, a few people are going to get upset, and then the people connected to them are by nature going to get upset, and soon we have a whole camp of people that get upset. If we have people that are part of an extremist group and they want to rile people, they can get people excited about a topic, enthusiastic about it, radicalized, and it spreads like a virus. Thanks for including that link, Trish. So this is a real thing that is now being studied in the online environment. Emotional contagion. Does it work both ways? Yes, it does. And this research actually, on this particular article, if you want to follow it up, the research they did is they took people and put them in an environment where they deliberately took away negative messages from their feeds, and they kept positive ones, and the tone changed and was positive. People were more likely to stay positive. When they took positive messages away, then the discussion turned negative. So like swimming in an ocean, you became whatever that ocean was that you were swimming with. Thanks for the question, Sonia. Again, back to Justin, the Facebook like fellow. Concerns about how it's changing our attention span. It's making it difficult to focus. And in his words, to think clearly, because we're being awash in information that's being fed to us, and it's being fed in particular to our characteristics. So the Cambridge Analytica folks, when they were doing the marketing for the election in the United States, the documentaries that I've seen on it and the reading that I've done on it is very specific that rather than send one blanket message out to everyone, they would customize thousands of versions of a message and send it based on who you were categorized as on Facebook. Whatever they knew about you, that's the message you got. So if you would be triggered by a blue button and a word, Hillary's a bad person, then you'd get that message. Someone else would get a different headline because they might be swayed by an issue related to government or immigration. They would get the same story basically, but headlined differently to spark their outrage and get them upset and active about it. So we're in a situation where media and knowledge of the media and our young people being aware that this is being done to them and to us is a critical thing for society to be aware of. Let's go back to Jean Twenge. She was tracking, one of the things in her books that she talks about is depression and loneliness. And because I was talking earlier about the fact that they do a lot of this research over time, they've been studying people for a long period of time at universities, and what they found is right around 2012 is when loneliness started to spike. And that's when the modern cell phone really became popular, and in the hands, BlackBerry turned into iPhone. Suicide-related outcomes, depression, happiness, all down. Satisfaction, all down, when people started spending more time on their phones rather than with other people. And so what she found is anything done with a screen is correlated with lower happiness. And she can't say that it's causal, but she can say that it's correlated. But there's other research that she's partnered with it that says that the correlations are real, like they're actively showing that the relationship is due to the phone. So this is part of her research. This is, again, a text version of her research. But the happiest adolescents are those who use digital media for less than an hour a day. She is, in other writing, said 2 hours a day, keep below 2 hours a day, but we already know the average is way above that. And what she's found is, on average, if you spend less than the average on the phone, you're going to be happier. If being active and doing other things face-to-face, going for walks, going bowling, doing aerobics, doing things, playing cards with friends, playing games with friends, being with people, if you do that higher than the average, you're going to be happier. So there's a direct relation to both of those things. So let me ask you a quick survey question here. This is based on our research that was done over 1,500 teens. They were 14 to 24 years old in the United Kingdom. And they took an analysis and said, how are these social media tools affecting young people? And which tools are having the most positive effect and which is having the most negative effect? So if I was to say to you, of the social media tools that are out there, under that plus sign, is there any social media tool that you think is having a really positive effect on young people, and which might it be? And under the negative sign, if there's a social media platform out there that you think is having a negative effect on body image, depression, sleep, etc., among young people, what would you put there? I'm going to give you a second to think about it. So if you were going to say tools like Snapchat or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, where would you put these things? Would they be things that were positive or things that were negatively impacting young people? Give that a little bit of thought, and then maybe use your typewriter key and be brave. Put your hand up and put the name of a tool under a plus or minus. And we'll see what your inclination is. Veronica, who's absent, is saying negative YouTube. Let me type that in for you, Veronica. And choose a bigger font here. So I was just saying YouTube, maybe negative, and Snapchat, maybe negative. Got another Snapchat negative. Anybody else? Is there any tools out there that you think would have a negative impact on young people, or any that would have a positive impact, based on the research in the United Kingdom? Anybody want to talk about that? Any brave microphone users out there with their hand up? My device won't let me write on the slides. Oh, that's a drag. But I'll put that in for you. Thanks, Jen. Instagram. Okay, well, here's what the research says. The most positive, YouTube. It's having the most positive effect on the way young people feel about themselves. So this is, again, the tool that is giving them autoplays of their music, giving them funny videos to see, probably a lot of uplifting things, but the odd negative thing too. Twitter, a little bit better than the others as well, and as far as positivity. And down at the bottom, Instagram, the idea about photos and living that perfect life, the colored life, and Snapchat being more negative, Facebook being a little bit neutral in the ones that they checked. So Instagram, the picture perfect life, Facebook, clusters us to people that think the same and talk the same. And YouTube, playing the next video in seconds, it's still seen as something that's positive in the research done in the UK. Snapchat and this idea about streaks. We did some talk last time about the fact that young people are being encouraged to message every single day with all their people to keep a streak alive for the most days. And that would certainly be stressful. Young people don't use Facebook as parents can monitor it. That's a good point. It's like they've gone to a different schoolyard to hang out beyond the reach of a lot of parents who can't keep up with the latest app change. And interestingly, they've chosen an app like Snapchat that messages that they post don't stick around forever. They are there and then they're gone. Young people have figured out that having messages that don't stay forever might be a good thing. So with young people not feeling well, this is, I thought, let's find out what's the deal with suicide, what's going on. And Ms. Twenge was talking about the fact that there's been increases over the past, up until from 2012 onward. And this is research from the OECD talking about different countries around the world and their suicide rates. And my simple question is, where's Canada on here? Where would Canada be? What do you think? Here's where Canada would be. Yeah, on the right-hand side of the graph, about the fifth tallest blue line, which is the most recent data from the year 2015. Number of suicides in Canada. So what's interesting is a lot of these sites, New Zealand, Iceland, Latvia, Estonia, Canada, Poland, a lot of them have a sort of a northern vibe. They're not southern countries. They're in the north. And one of the things that's correlated to that is light. The research that I found is talking a little bit about the relation of light and screens, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a bit. But Canada, a lot of people in Canada in particular, being an affluent country that has access to these devices, is suffering a lot of the depression. Ontario's high. We're adding extra reading weeks in university. Yeah, and we're bringing the puppies in, and the lack of vitamin D. Those are excellent points. Thanks very much, Veronica. These other countries, they're well off. People have money in these countries a lot of the time, and so they have devices. They have things that if we think a materialistic world, having things would make one happy. But light is playing a role. So I think anyway. So I dug into that a little bit, and I found that the light is related to depression. So if you saw the light of a screen or your bedroom wasn't totally dark, you get symptoms of depression. The darker your bedroom is, the better you sleep, the more serotonin your body will give, which is that relaxing chemical in the brain that secretes and relaxes. The darker, the better. And when we're dealing with screens, we know that having access to a phone disrupts one's sleep. So young people with phones go to bed later, they get less sleep, they get less quality sleep, and there's the thought that melatonin doesn't get released in the dosages that it normally would, in part because the brain is being tricked into thinking it's daytime with the amount of time that we spend on screens. So it doesn't help that young people often have their screens at their bedside, so that if it vibrates or that fear of missing out that's more important to them than the sleep. And the research is saying, hey, for your mental health, your sleep is critical. So, I mean, we'll talk about advice next time and how to deal with a lot of this. But keeping that phone out of the bedroom is a key. I heard a research. There's a woman who started the Huffington Post. She's an older woman. I heard an interview with her. I guess it's about a month ago. And she talked about how the phone does not go in my bedroom. She had a wonderful European accent. And she was bang on. After hearing that and finding this information, my phone doesn't come in the bedroom anymore. There's a need for sleep, and it's good for you. This is just one of the studies. I included it. This is about 5 years ago, but the link is there that melatonin is also connected to cancer. If you don't have your melatonin levels high, there's a greater chance you have cancer. And so this is research that was done on exposure to light levels based on screens that you're in front of. Late hockey playoffs, student moods the next day, different screen, same result. Oh, very excellent point, Ramona. Yeah. Staying up late, not good for us. So here's a little bit of information. This is this is another participatory research. So you know how scientists have to ask questions and sort of make that prediction about what the answer is before they go on. Your students and phones, having phones at school. This is research to decide what the impact is if you have a cell phone nearby. If it's face down on the desk in front of you, if it's separate in a bag or purse or pocket, or if it's in another room. Just think to yourself, which of those would most impact your thinking in a negative way? Face down in front of you, in a purse or bag, or in the other room. Which would be most stressful, stress-inducing, most distracting? There's a vote for face down. Face down or pocket. There's another vote for face down or pocket. Good. Thank you. Put a little bit of check mark for there and there because you've said the two. And someone's saying the other room. Okay. We know from research that it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. What's important is finding out the answer. And I think you're on the right track. The results found that people who had phones in another room performed the best in academic tests. Those that did the poorest had their phones out on their desks. And it didn't matter whether phones were on or off. If the phones were nearby, you didn't do as well as if your phones were in a different room. And the difference in performance was equivalent to being without good sleep. This is what the graph of that actually looked like. So they measured two different things. One was sustained attention, and one cognitive capacity. And while one of them had not a big difference, the go or no go, the cognitive capacity, the availability to concentrate and use your brain power to do stuff was impacted far more greatly. So there's something here that they theorize is that the brain actually has to set aside part of it to attend to whether or not something is coming in, to attend to be alert to a signal. Part of the brain is off-sourced to do that work. And it's not conscious. It's a subconscious effect. Maybe you've had the situation where you've had your phone in a pocket and you're sure it vibrated. You're positive you just got an alert. But you check, and sure enough, there was no alert. But your body has become attuned to this idea about being on the lookout for that message, that sometimes a faulty message gets through. And this being alert for messages is something that's real. So if you work with young people and you say, just put your phone aside, don't touch it, the best thing to do is put it right away, out of the room, out of sight, out of mind. And one of the things that we're trying to encourage ourselves is to be healthier ourselves with regard to our attention that we give to our devices. I'm going to tune you to Note to Self. It's another advertisement for this fine podcast. But they have a project this week that I'd like to share with you called Info Magical. It's a way to help you get over this idea about overload of information. I highly recommend checking it out. Basically, they'll give you some challenges. I think it's 5 different challenges. And when you do them, you might find yourself being more creative, being more social, being more in tune with you as a person, as opposed to being in tune with the news of the day or the social of what everybody else is up to. So we took a look at the quest for attention in part 1, this idea that not only are we looking for attention, but the people who make the devices and apps are trying to draw our attention from us. Tonight, the idea was to look at this idea that we are uber connected, but a lot of us are in states of loneliness in that connectedness. And what we're going to look at next time is what are the strategies to help us find balance between the benefits of these technologies and the benefits of having these technologies off and away from us. What are some of the strategies we can use as families, as teachers in our classrooms? What can we do about that? And I will share with you this idea that it's not new. This idea, this concern about a technology making people lonely and into their own is not new. This from Punch magazine in 1907, when the ticker tape first came out, the big fear that next year, after Christmas, when the ticker tapes are out, when everyone gets their new ticker tape machine, they're going to be not talking to one another. They're just going to be watching that information come in. And here we are 110, 111 years later, and whether the lady receiving an amatory message or the gentleman looking at racing results, we're disconnecting from one another just a little bit. So again, the links for this presentation are available on the slide deck, and again, they'll be made available to you. Tricia has access to them. And then I just want to let you know some of the images that weren't screen captures. The screen captures are actually referenced with direct hyperlink if you look at the SlideShareNet website that I shared. But the image credits for some of the unique images that I used of some of the presenters are included here as well. So that is sort of the end of the presentation. The final message, just to remind yourself, people who hang out with face-to-face things, whether they're religious, print media, or school homework, correlate positively with happiness. And the screen things that we do are correlated negatively with happiness or correlated with unhappiness. So that's the heart of the message that I wanted to share with you. We've got more to talk about and discuss and think about. But tonight, that's I'm going to leave it to there and maybe transfer over to Trish. But before we do that, if anybody has any questions or would like to take the microphone and share any thoughts, I'd be certainly happy to pass that over. No comments, questions? Anybody?
Brad, I think I see a couple of people typing, so I'm just going to wait another minute.
Okay. Where did that come from? Education of Science. I'm not sure what MJ would have to clarify that for me. What's the that, and where did that come from? Slide 52. This fellow? Maybe. Or is it slide 82? This is from a TED Talk, the finger speech. If you look up in the quarter, I think there's a link to that from the slide. But if you look his name up at TED, you'll be able to see and hear him talk about that. It's actually it's a nice little short talk he's given there on linguistics. Used in text. Sorry, it's table of symbols. Oh, the table of symbols. There's a link to that. If you click on it, let me. I'm going to leave this for Trish. Trish, I'm going to go get that link and paste it. Okay? Just take me a second.
Yeah, and just a reminder, the links will be on the OTF website. I know that you can't click on the screen right now, but that's one of the things I'll be doing. I think I'll take this opportunity to say thank you very much to Rod for giving us so much to think about again. I'm going to pause the recording and post a couple of more things. So hang on, folks.